Okay, here we go. Here we go. Oh, um, um, you have an exaggeration for effect here, and it's a very strong effect. Now, uh, one of the really interesting parts of this down here in verse 22 and following, poor man died and was carried to the bosom, Abraham's bosom, and he goes to Hades. And this is addressed to Father Abraham, et cetera, et cetera. This notion of Abraham's bosom, it does appear in 4 Maccabees. And we also see it in John 1:18. No one has ever seen God, the only Son, who is in the bosom of the Father. Right? And we see in 4 Maccabees 13, therefore let us put on the full armor of self-control, which is divine reason. For if we so die, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob will welcome us, and all the fathers praise us. So this notion of dying and going to Abraham and the bosom of Abraham, which is a wonderful figure of speech, the great spiritual. Rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham, rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham, rock of my soul in the bosom of Abraham, Lord, rock of my soul. Now, this is what we're seeing here is a Jewish kind of folklore. We talked a lot about eternal life and what the Jews thought about eternal life. This would have been in the folklore part of folk religion. And so here is this man in the bosom of Abraham, which is very graphic. You will notice also that the rich man is in Hades. Now, Hades, of course, is a Greek term. It means hell, the afterlife. It is usually represented from the Greek Gehenna. Gehenna, if you go to Jerusalem, there is a valley going south of the city, and it cuts all the way across to the Jezreel Valley, or not the Jezreel Valley, but to the valley in the east between the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem there. And that's where a dump was. They would throw the dump off the walls, and it would catch fire and burn. So sometimes you will see Gehenna. It's the Valley of Hinnom there. That's the Valley of Hinnom. And so it's associated with the afterlife, and it's hot and burning there. And that's where the rich man was. Okay, yes.
I have a little quick question.
Sure.
So the poor man was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. So instead of with God or with Jesus, to be with Abraham. And I'm showing my ignorance, but I'm not sure why. I realize this is folklore. So what is the lore? Because Abraham was so prominent, so important.
Abraham's the first man who worshipped God.
A real God.
Yeah, worshipped Yahweh.
Yeah.
So
he's also with God, this poor man, but alongside Abraham.
Well, no, you understand now that we're talking folklore, we're not talking high theology here.
Okay.
And Abraham is the father.
Okay.
Matter of fact, the word Ab means father.
Oh, yeah, Abba.
In Hebrew. This is a folk portrayal of the afterlife.
Okay.
So
yeah, that fits.
That's all.
And it uses the word, when just kind of looking it up, it uses the word comfort.
Oh.
So in the bosom of Abraham is comfort, to be comforted. So it's kind of the way that it translates it is. So he's comforted, and the rich man, Scrooge,
yeah,
is in the burning flames. And
yeah.
I think also, in this case, Abraham, so the person's
in Hades, and he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off. Right, so I think everyone knows Abraham was a good guy.
Right.
Abraham is with.
Went to
is
heaven.
In heaven, is in with God, right? So I mean, that's another way of saying it, yeah, perhaps. Maybe it's a designation.
It's kind of the opposite of, if you kind of tie this, because you can kind of picture Scrooge as the rich man, of Charles Dickens and the image of the poor kid,
Right,
Albert,
right,
looking in the window at all the rich people with their food.
right.
So in this case, it's the tables have been turned. Now it's
Right.
the rich man that's on the outside looking in. He's
Right.
distanced from Abraham.
right, exactly, yeah,
So I kind of like to,
yeah. Right,
image it from stories that we all recognize.
right, yeah, that's true, that's good. Thank you.
So, what do we
He
got? How
could
do you
probably
feel
even say
about
Moses,
hearing
there,
this?
right? Could he also have said Moses and it would have had the same impact, right? No,
No, I don't
Abraham
think
was the key.
He's the comforter.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's the comforter because Moses gave the law.
Oh,
And that's
Abraham.
not the same. is it?
Okay, got it, yep.
It's like George Washington, he's the father.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Steve,
I find it interesting that Lazarus has a name and the rich man doesn't have a name. Is there significance to this?
I know, what do you think? Yeah, it's
That's
hard
a
to
very
tell.
interesting comment.
I mean, the notion that one is given a name is interesting. I was just wondering if
Yeah.
there's some meaning behind the name Lazarus and like connect.
Is it the same Lazarus?
No.
No.
Of course not, okay.
It's a,
So,
it's a common name.
So it must have,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
It's a common name.
but we've got more than.
Abraham is a common name too. So this was a special Abraham.
So how does this make you guys feel?
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable?
Yes.
Ian is always uncomfortable.
It was like, one of the things is like, versus 26. Like, there's this chasm that's been fixed in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able.
Yeah.
And plus, you can't come over the line. What around?
Good morning. Becky. Do you have, do you get my email?
Yes.
Good, good.
No.
Write your address. There's-
I think it's very applicable to tie it to society today and the images that we have of the very wealthy. We think of the 1%, the people that have everything, and they just keep taking more away from the people that have nothing. So the greedy people, you like to say in simple terms, you can't take that wealth with you. But you can take the chains, you can take all the bad deeds of your life with you, but you can't take your wealth. So those bad chains are distancing you from Abraham in the story. But you can't take that wealth that you took the wealth while people were living and let them starve. So that you could have more when you already had enough for
More than you needed anyway.
a million lifetimes,
Along with the.
Doesn't Elon Musk need more money? No, he's the wealthiest man in the world, but does he want more? Yes. Is he gonna take it with him? No. What's he gonna take with him? Those chains.
And the rich man can't claim ignorance because he's at the gate. He had to pass him all the time.
Exactly,
So he just must have turned his face.
right.
But
So-
how many rich people are hiding because they don't want that association?
Well, how many of you drive past the people on Washtenaw who have out their bags? Waiting for you to give them money when you're at this stoplight? I mean, let's not just talk about the rich people, let's talk about ourselves. Do you ever drive past those people and that could be like walking past Lazarus, right?
If it's convenient in terms of traffic flow.
Well,
And it's a website where I can. Yeah, I can do that, get my wallet out fast.
But the question is, I'm sure there are many areas where we in our own lives we're not generous where we could be, and maybe that's what we need to look at versus, people.
Versus the villains.
Well, yeah, those are really easy to point to, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's
Wonder if they want some Halloween candy.
Wonder if it's more effective to give to like the Delona Center
Well, it could be, but that's
Well, I
not
think
the,
that,
I mean,
they prefer that you do.
Yeah.
Rather than give it out,
Mhm.
because you might go just directly to drugs, you don't know.
so maybe this guy gave some, apparently this guy didn't have, you know, there was no Delana Center back then, but the,
Gift cards to Subway.
but do you think even, and I agree with you completely, that's a better, I totally agree with you, right? But even, I don't think this is really designed to make us talk about the
Those
terrible
people.
wealthy people. I think it's
Mhm.
designed to make us look into ourselves.
You're right.
But it, you know, it has to do with, from philosophy, basic theories of justice, you know, one of the basic theories of justice is those that are better off that you give back.
Yes,
And that's an index tax system, as we would call it here.
Yeah.
And then there's the opposite, it says it's a bloody game of monopoly, and those that fall behind, pity them, they didn't play a good game.
yeah.
So, you know, so you do apply that, but I think when you apply it on the micro level to your life
Mhm.
versus macro looking at society, it's easy to, you know, it's easy to talk about in society, the greedy wealthy, the filthy wealthy. But when you,
That's a
do
terrible
fo-
term, sorry.
but when you do focus it, just, you know, could you say that each of us in our own lives, when we have more than we need to survive, then we're indeed rich, right?
Right.
Yes.
And do we share, you know,
Right.
do we try
Right.
to share what we have with those that can use our
And,
help?
and then, and then it gets to that really difficult question, well, how much sharing is enough, right? And you always, right, and this, I don't know, does this speak to that at all? Does it speak to how much is enough? I don't know. Is it even about that?
Well, yeah, let's consider that because no, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent.
They did what? I didn't hear you.
What does that mean in number in 30? He said, so Abraham replied, they have Moses and the prophets, they should listen to them. He said, no, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the
Oh,
dead,
so he's saying,
they will repent.
so he's saying that if,
That's the story from Scrooge of being visited by the three spirits.
right,
That's
Yeah,
how you can picture it in your
Right.
head. So what they're saying is you have to learn from the living world. You know, do you learn from the living world, or do you have to be visited from the dead? Do spirits have to come back and teach you, or do you learn from the world in which we live?
There's an interesting part about this that is uncertain to me. Here this gentleman's gone to the bosom of Abraham, right? Then Lazarus went to the bosom of Abraham. Everybody would have known about the bosom of Abraham, and that would have been sufficient for Jesus's crowd. Right?
Oh,
Mhm.
So it's possible, there's a possibility here that that Luke did was add the last phrase, last sentence. See,
right,
because of course Jesus was still alive there. He
right,
said,
it does seem
I
possible.
have Moses here, and he said, no, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. And he said to him, if they did not hear Moses, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. What do you think that says about the early church? Or those people who are not persuaded?
Oh,
mhm.
yeah, those people. Some of those people are the Pharisees and all those guys who know the law.
Yeah.
But they're not as interested in talking to Moses.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, it does. Yeah, if this is Luke's story, it has a different meaning than if it's Jesus.
well, but see, that's just an addition on the end,
Yeah,
see? So what does that say about what the gospel is all about? Too, right? I mean, how is it preached to folks?
mhm.
And what do you think it means to you guys?
When was Luke written?
Luke was written somewhere between around 70 to 90. So that would have been 50 to 60 years after the resurrection.
Are you saying that this last part is kind of?
I didn't hear that, please.
Are you saying that this last part was kind of a commentary to the early church members saying, those other people who aren't with us? It's not gonna go well for them.
Well, not only
Jesus
that,
came and we listened to him.
what, consider now, particularly the book of Acts. What does Luke have to say about the Jews? The Jews are the persecutors of the church.
I
It's not
was,
the Romans. The Jews are, in the Acts, they're the ones that try to get them arrested, they're the ones that cast them out, they're all those kinds of things. And here's Paul going out and trying to preach the gospel where Jesus is resurrected and the Jews don't buy it.
Mhm.
Is that because they're using the law to protect what's theirs is theirs? And anybody that wants to change the law, it's not in their personal best interest to do so. So they're using the law for their own benefit.
So what do you guys think? I mean, what do you guys think about?
also the one telling the stories about the early Christians who didn't share their money and were struck down dead, right?
Could be that it applies to them as well. See, there's a kind of a double nuance here. Clearly, the intent, when it talks to Abraham, it seems to me, about talking about being in the bosom of Abraham, that would have spoken to anybody and maybe speaks to anybody today. And it's a hard message. But this little thing at the end
So-
is something else, isn't it?
Seems to me interesting, to me, what I'm suddenly seeing, that verses 19 through 26 are the setup. And the real message is 27 through the end.
Yes.
So the
Yes.
setup is, in this case, the setup is in the form also of a parable, but
Yeah.
it's
The setup's in the
it's
parable
not
itself.
really, that's not the key issue. And, yeah.
What it kind of said, I Googled the term bosom of Abraham, and there's a whole big long article about it, and basically it says that the righteous who wait in the bosom of Abraham, they wait in joy for judgment, because having lived a righteous life, that they know that they're bound for heaven. It's all the people that have not lived a righteous life that they don't know what awaits them. So it's kind of like, it seems like that's what it's saying too, is that if you've lived a righteous life, then you die with no fear. But if you haven't, then you may be afraid to die because you don't know where you're headed.
Ruth had a comment.
But isn't Abraham the guy who succumbed to his wife's demands that he father a child with Hagar? And then turn around and throw Ishmael and Hagar out?
And was drunk in his tent.
Abraham?
Yeah,
Noah was drunk on his
Noah.
death.
that was Noah,
Hmm.
or maybe both of them.
So I don't care for this much as a message. I think it's all pretty dark.
Uh-huh.
Scrooge at least gets to redeem himself. at the
Yes.
end.
Yes,
And there are elements of forgiveness and compassion
right.
and love
Uh-huh.
in that story that are totally missing here.
Yes.
No,
This guy sort of sees the errors of his ways at some point,
Right.
and the message to him is, too bad, you're stuck.
right, but God, and Jesus did forgive Abraham. Abraham wasn't terribly nice.
No, neither was Dickens though.
Yeah.
Dickens was not nice either. So
So, but that's the hope. Is there's this not very nice guy, Abraham, up there being called the bosom of Abraham as a big comforter. That's,
It may be that sometimes we can read too much into a parable.
sorry.
And that's quite all right, because it's common. And we have to realize that we have an intended message, and the intended message about Abraham is not how bad he was, I
I,
think.
I want to go back to your comment about preaching this. If I were to preach this,
Yeah,
I think I would take a note from what you said. And I would title the sermon, "What is righteous living to you?" And then let the people kind of work around that, let it stew in them. However they go with that, I don't know if I'd have a whole lot else to say besides,
Well,
what is this challenge to you?
you know, you brought up an interesting point, though, it may, just to clarify what you said. You know, that the rich man, you know, what he basically said was, you know, he was, you could, I'm kind of paraphrasing this as I interpret it, that he was damned, but he wanted to send back and help his brothers. So he wasn't helping himself, he was now gonna say, oh, wait, I'm screwed, but can you go back and help my brothers? So in that, he actually cared for somebody other than himself. So it's, you know, to me, that's kind of an interesting point. He wasn't trying to save himself. He was trying to then say to his brothers, can you go back and give them the message that they need to fix their ways? So I thought that was an interesting
The message
clarification.
back to him is,
Yeah, he's gone, but hey, let my brothers know they need to clean up their act or else, you know.
Yeah, but the final answer is, well, if they haven't been listening to Moses and the prophets,
It's too late for them already.
it's too late for the
No,
prophets,
right.
it's not that it's too late, it's that they won't hear.
They
They're
won't
not
hear,
hearing Moses
yeah,
and the prophets.
'cause
They, you know, that, then they're not gonna hear.
Right, because to me, that's the Scrooge thing and sending back the three ghosts right there is.
No, it's
is-
Jacob. Jacob, Marley.
Right,
Marley's the one who came in and
Right.
he's Lazarus. Not, yeah, he said, look at Scrooge, look at what I've done to myself.
okay,
Clean up your act.
okay, yeah, cause I mean, it seems like that story runs very parallel to this story.
except but he puts, hope in it, which is, I'm with you, Tim, no hope in
Yeah,
this.
there's no hope here. That was the story of what if they did go back and tell them?
Isn't that interesting that,
We have somebody who came back from the dead.
Right, that's the thing.
yes,
there isn't a message for the living that says you may be on the wrong track, but learn from this. And if you change the error of your ways, you will be forgiven and you'll end up in the non-garbage dump.
in the bosom of Abraham.
In the bosom of Abraham.
Like,
So there's a teaching.
like the
opportunity
young
that
man
seems to be
who,
missed.
who went to Jesus and he was a righteous young man,
Yeah,
but he was wealthy. And said, how can I become what you
eternal
need?
life, yeah, gain
Yeah.
eternal life.
And he said, you have to give away everything that you have.
That's the other, we're gonna get to that,
Yeah.
maybe, yes. That's, we kind of pick and choose when we talk about the gospel, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, who's being spoken about in the very last line? Neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead.
That maybe Luke, who knows, right? This is where Ed's saying, this may be where Luke sort of adds this at the end because Jesus has risen,
Has risen, okay.
right? So maybe those weren't. for
Even if,
Jesus.
yeah, even if someone, not mentioning any
Or-
It
names.
would have changed, wouldn't it have changed the message substantially if he had said to this crowd, you know, even if I come back from the dead, you still won't believe.
Well, Jesus did, and they still
I
didn't
know,
believe it.
but if he had said that,
Right.
Yeah,
said that.
Yep.
So the someone allows Luke to refer to Jews.
To Jesus.
To refer to Jesus without being specific to the crowd.
that's pretty interesting.
It's congruent with the setting of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a power here, isn't there, folks?
yeah.
Pretty scary.
The law is not very forgiving. is it?
Well, or maybe it's also a little bit about common sense. Sometimes, you know, our rich man is wishing that someone could go to his brothers, someone from the dead could go, sort of like alarm them, wake them up,
Right.
get them to realize this, right? But in fact, that's often not how life works. Even when someone alarms us, we don't change. You know, right, and so it might, and that is sort of what Abraham or whoever is saying. Even if that were to happen, there's no guarantee that they're gonna change.
That they're gonna listen,
Right,
yeah.
because right, and if they don't listen to that, are they gonna listen to the fact that Jesus?
And this is Abraham.
Yep.
But I mean, if this is Luke in that last
Yeah,
sentence,
yeah.
actually, if that's supposed to fall into our minds.
Do we know that that was Luke's addition, or
We
this is
don't
just
know.
a guess?
We
Okay,
don't know that, that's my speculation.
okay,
I think that, I mean, Jesus could have said, even realizing about his own,
future, yeah,
resurrection to
right.
come. I'm of those folks who not sure that Jesus was fully aware of what was gonna happen, but that's just my bias. So he may have fully known by then and wanted to give that particular message.
But also, I will say it seems a little bit cynical, as well, you know, I mean, if they don't, you know, if someone, so of the Jews, if they don't hear Moses, then they're just not gonna hear anything. It sort of feels a little.
What does that say about who will you listen to,
Well, that's a good question.
particularly these days, isn't it?
Mhm.
Mhm.
If you have a hard truth,
Mhm.
who can persuade?
Mhm. Mhm.
We don't teach persuasion in schools.
Yes, we do.
Really?
Still, we teach how to recognize persuasion, not how to produce it, but how to recognize it. Now, that's a big feature in 9th and 10th grade English curriculum now.
But how do I implement, if I want to persuade,
That's not
how
taught.
do I do that?
That's not, yeah,
So
rhetoric.
you
is
say it's
called.
taught like they would teach you to debate, is that? Like,
It's taught by observing, for example, reading the Crucible, and then it's all about mob behavior, actually.
okay,
And then also bringing in a lot of different texts and videos showing how people do use rhetorical devices to persuade people.
mhm.
And then you have to identify them. How are they trying, what are they doing here to get you to believe something? Because kids need that badly to hear this stuff is going on, and
You know, our
Yeah.
speaker last Sunday talked about the methods they're using, the modern, in today's modern world, the methods that they're using to persuade people. That was
Right.
last week, that was
that's
really,
exactly what.
That's a powerful issue these days.
oh, it is,
Right.
it is.
And I think it's one of the more relevant of all issues that we have to deal with. And he's hoping that this same Lazarus who's from the bosom of Israel, of Abraham, is gonna come back and persuade his brothers.
Right.
Think it'll work?
Why is it Lazarus?
Pardon me?
Why is it Lazarus is asked?
That's what he asked for. Because
Yeah.
Lazarus knows the consequences for sure, of his neglect to follow the law.
And Lazarus is motivated by, like, here I am in the bosom of Abraham. Why do I want to go and help you and your brother?
Well,
Nobody asks him and he doesn't say a thing.
Mm-hmm.
who knows?
No angels are asked for. Anybody else? Well, maybe
Jealousy.
Just to keep the story
It
simple.
actually said, you know, when I heard that he asked Lazarus, to dip his finger
In water.
to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue. So he was still asking Lazarus to be his servant. Yeah, be my servant, even in death, you know, you're less than me. Yet it was his servant that was in the bosom of Abraham, and he was worse off. So he hadn't learned his lesson because he still treated him as less of a person.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think it says about us and our willingness to be persuaded from what we believe, our firmly believe is true?
I think it's
Yeah.
pretty accurate, probably.
Pardon me?
I think it's probably pretty accurate. Very few people
Yeah.
are, leave their persuaded stance or belief.
Well, I think that, there was a rich man. But he was speaking to regular people. So he exaggerated that. But it really was aimed at everybody,
Mhm,
not just the wealthy,
right.
but people who got along okay, had enough to eat, had what they needed. And didn't think of themselves as being
Well,
unworthy.
how many of the deadly sins was the rich man? He was feasting sumptuously, so he was a glutton, so you could go.
Well, he was just okay. He had a lot of money and he could do whatever he wanted with it.
Mhm.
And so that was fine for those people listening because he wasn't talking about them,
Oh,
Yeah.
but he was.
but he was. Interesting, yeah.
I see, one of the powerful things about parables is you can bypass resistance.
Right.
Storytelling allows you to get to something,
Mhm.
because if you told them, you're this way, you're ignoring it, people will say, oh, no, that's not me.
That's not-
But you tell it this way, you can bypass that resistance, and now listen to the story. Now, rather than, storytelling is powerful stuff, yeah.
So. He isn't told it's because you didn't share. He's told you got good things in your life.
Hmm.
And then farther on down, I guess is the idea, you didn't listen to Moses and the prophets.
But I
So
think,
that's the thing that people should be doing.
Well, and also the Moses and the prophets says something about the poor,
Oh,
don't they?
Yeah.
So the law says about how are we supposed to treat the poor?
Yeah.
And that says something else.
but you see, when Lazarus says, send this poor guy to me so that he can quench my burning tongue. He's still being selfish.
The rich man says that, yeah.
Yeah, but so he hasn't learned anything.
Right. And one thought I had too was looking at that, the rich man, from the way that they describe him, he didn't do anything to hurt poor people. He just simply didn't do anything to help them, right? So he wasn't trying to do evil. He just didn't occur to him to do good.
The truth and nothing but the truth, the whole truth.
Here's another consideration, right? One of the significant things that Jesus had to approach, and so Paul, that this notion that you can tell who's right and who's good by whether or not they prosper. The assumption is that good people will prosper and poor people will not. Okay, and so what that does is turns the rich man into a theoretical good guy.
That's what Joel Osteen will tell you.
So, yeah, there are people who do in fact preach that, Joel Osteen, the
Yes.
prosperity gospel. That if you're wealthy, God wants you to be wealthy, and if you're not, then there's something wrong with you.
no, he doesn't ever
And
say.
so you have here to set up this
But
notion
he does no good.
that we see something like this before. We saw the notion of in the Good Samaritan. The Samaritan is supposed to be the bad guys, so the reverse of it, supposed to be the bad guy, and the good guys, the priests and the Levite, passed them by. So we have these memes of roles that people are in. And they can really get to you if you really think about it sometimes.
Well, he didn't want to complicate things too much.
How so?
Well, because it'll get beyond them if he does. So, there's a group of people out there and it helps them to hear about what this rich man.
That's right.
Whereas really, what Jesus is talking about is you.
Jesus was too smart to be a Sunday school teacher.
Yes. Yes, he was.
Most people think of Dolly Parton and Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, what do you mean?
As good people? You mean
Well,
giving things away?
They
Well,
are very
Oprah
generous.
Winfrey has, I mean, I'm sorry, Dolly Parton's all about literacy,
Uh-huh.
and what she's done for her career is huge.
Yeah,
Hey, there's no doubt she's wealthy.
Very.
right,
Again, Oprah,
right, this is just playing on a stereotype, clearly, which is not always, as we know, true. That's why it's called a stereotype, right? Yeah. So lots of generous rich people.
I got something I need to do here.
We gotta talk amongst ourselves now.
Well, I was thinking that wealthy people can do very good things.
mhm,
They're able to do it, so they do it. And it's good that they do it.
Right.
But if you compare that with somebody who doesn't have a lot of money and does stuff, who is doing the most?
The poor person may be giving more of their wealth to share with others, whereas the rich person is just giving,
Giving, because
they're
they,
giving a little bit, but they could give a lot more.
they
But
could give
but
a
the
lot
poor
more. Yeah,
person
they could give a lot
that
more.
gives their last piece of bread to a starving kid, they're giving all that they had left.
Yeah,
One thing I thought was kind of, because you talked earlier about the state of, the Jews at this time, you know, that the rich man really, like I said, he didn't do anything bad. He just didn't do anything good. He didn't give back. But yet the leaders of, the Jewish faith at that time, they were attacking, they were actually doing evil.
Mm.
You know, they persecuted Jesus, so they actually, you know, they did evil things, whereas he didn't necessarily do anything evil, he just didn't do anything good. So it's kind of like trying to classify these different, you know,
but they felt they had the law on their side,
They had
so
it,
they were.
because they were
law
using the
applied.
law to do evil. They used it for evil purposes, right? The sheriff that uses the law to take your property away from you, you know, the evil sheriff. Nottingham, right? So the Jewish priests that are using the law to attack Jesus, to have him crucified. They were doing bad, you know, versus this rich person wasn't doing anything bad, he just wasn't necessarily happy.
Well, it wasn't very nice of him when he said to dip your finger in the waters and cool my tongue.
Well, because
That was pretty
he saw the person as his servant,
Exactly,
right?
so
but-
that's
but
not good, that's
that's-
awful.
No, but being a servant is not the same as sending your servant to be crucified,
Right.
that's evil.
I mean, true. Okay, true enough.
so how much does the rich man have to give away to be accepted?
Right, that is
Does he have to give it to the point where he's, you know,
the poor person, ultimately.
Mhm.
That's always,
that's what, to me, that's another waste, because if he was capable of producing wealth,
he could help a lot of people.
Yeah,
And that would be a good thing. So you have to be careful. It's not, there are nuances.
So if Abraham had allowed a dead person to go and speak to the brothers, that would be pretty awesome, but I have a bunch of sisters, I have a whole list of family members. If you do it for this person, I can think of a whole bunch of people I know that would be send grandpa who's been dead for 50 years and they'll listen. That would really be setting incredible precedent.
How many of us have kids where we try to give them advice and say, learn from my mistakes, and how many times do they listen to us? And how many times do they have to make the mistake for themselves because, right, so even if the dead came back and they told us, we still would have to learn on our own because we wouldn't listen.
But
Our kids never listen, right?
But Lazarus first, he's not changing his ways, and second, he's talking to the wrong person. I mean, if he's talking to Abraham to send his servant back, Abraham's not the.
But
all-powerful.
Lazarus is the
Oh.
poor. You're talking about the rich man.
The rich man,
The rich man isn't changing his ways.
right, and he's also, talking to Abraham saying, please, send him back. But Abraham's not in the position of power.
Right.
It's God and Jesus who has that power.
Yet even if he did send them back, they wouldn't listen,
Right,
right?
and they still don't have, the big picture. Does Abraham have the big picture?
So do our lessons have to come from within us?
Right.
Got 5 minutes, folks.
Which is, what a parable maybe is aimed at. I think parables typically are pointing exactly to that,
Yeah,
right?
because God is within us, so the answer is always within you. As Dorothy learned cooking
And
at
the
Three
parable
Hills,
may-
the answer was always inside her. So the answers are always inside you because God is
A lot
inside
of-
you.
a lot of
I can always hide. know, I learned that in college, and that all stories are based on 6 basic myths. So all the, if you think of any of the great novels or stories you've written, they all tell these same stories.
Mhm.
You can always apply this to, to your favorite movie. If it was well written, of course.
Well, I think we can't forget, because I think it's really important, we can't forget that the parables, he was speaking parables to regular people, of whom some of them were poor, some of them had a little more, some were just regular. And so they're not too complicated, doesn't need to be complicated.
Well, but they often are a little tricky for us.
Yes, because we have the benefit of time and scholars.
And the disadvantage of not living in that culture.
Yeah.
So we don't actually, so
Yeah.
we have to analyze a
But
little bit.
it really is Jesus speaking to regular people.
Mhm.
Hasn't this story through the ages been used by the wealthy, by the kings, by the elite class to speak to the masses who are the poor people, and to tell you that, you're suffering today, but you will, this is how the church has controlled poor people through all the ages. I know you're poor, but hey, in the next life, you'll be rewarded. So don't rebel against your king today, because
Yeah.
right? This really tells that story that we've suffered through life, we do so knowing that our ultimate reward awaits. All those evil rich people, their reward will await them too. So it's this story has been used to
Multiple ways.
to control mankind for the last 20 centuries.
So it says here that 99% of the people in ancient Rome were the poor.
Yeah.
So there was no real ordinary people were the poor.
With a pope, yeah, that's who they were.
From what I've read of medieval history, it was a very powerful tool. That message is a very powerful tool to keep people in line. The church was extremely powerful and held the keys to the kingdom.
Mhm.
And so the religious message was a powerful way of maintaining the status quo.
Right.
And that was pretty good until the Communist Manifesto.
Well, until Martin Luther, actually,
Pardon me?
until Martin Luther came along and said, oh, no,
Right.
I don't want to just have to buy my
Well, I
penance.
understand
Yeah.
that Martin Luther, his message was against buying your way into heaven.
Right,
But
you're
it was
right.
really under Marx in the 19th century
yeah.
that started to leak down and be literally challenge to that capital system.
But you're exactly right, because the monarchy were granted their authority to lead by God.
That's right.
Right.
So this part of the message that we've come across here has been a powerful way to keep people in their place and to keep them from revolting. Keep them from people lose hope.
Yeah.
If people lose hope, what'll happen?
Right.
And you know, it's possible that there may be something of that going on today.
Oh, yeah.
What makes you think that?
Okay, folks. Next week, we're gonna, I've forgotten the particular citation, but we're gonna read another one of those that we're not gonna like much. This is gonna be from, next week will be from Matthew, and will be about the parable about the wedding guests, the wedding guests. So I will put the particular citation in my email when I send it out. Any questions before we go?
Oh, my gosh.
Didn't we get to them all?
I don't think so.
Well, we can talk about it again next week if we want.
Yes.
That's the nice thing about this model.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ash.